This is the Dynasty Roundtable podcast YouTube channel. Today, again, we're continuing our trend of talking about I hate to even use the term off season because we know there's no off season in Dynasty, but June, July, leading those months leading into August, they can be a little bit slow. So today we're going to be talking about strategies to sort of get the grease the wheels, so to speak, get your league, make some more trades, maybe in the summertime, some strategies that you can use to improve your team, even in the slowest months for Dynasty. So, Matt Babich, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing wonderful, Seth. And actually, I'm going to challenge what you say or what you just said there and what you have said on multiple occasions that there technically isn't any offseason in Dynasty. I think it's the other way around where there is an offseason in Dynasty because there are acquisitions that you're making. You're making trades in addition to preparing for a draft that doesn't just redetermine your entire team from top to bottom year over year like redraft. It adds on to your continuous team, and you could choose whether you want to draft with those rookie picks if you have them or trade them away for different players. And these are off-season activities that NFL teams engage in, right? And picking up free agents from now, your rookie draft until the season starts. There's no off-season and redraft. You're not doing anything. Your season is done, and you start up a new season, new team, new everything, maybe with keepers, but there's no activity happening. You redraft every year, but with Dynasty, we have so many things to be paying attention to. There is most definitely an offseason, and that's why we're here to talk about how to gain an advantage and how to dominate your Dynasty offseason.
That's right. And, a few news, which, by the way, one of the things we're going to talk about and touch on is staying on top of the news and using that to your advantage. Aaron Rodgers obviously signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I talked about it a little bit last night, but I don't know if this matters much. I mean, I guess if you need a quarterback, you can go out and get Aaron Rodgers for cheap, but I don't know how effective he's going to be. But the big one that I wanted to talk to you about right off the bat here is Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson dealing with a shoulder injury, and immediately in one of my leagues, I got a trade offer that I thought was pretty generous for Daniel Jones because I have both Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson. So this is I'm kind of putting you on the spot here. Anthony Richardson, as a result of this news, what are we doing with him? I mean, because you would think that people are slating Daniel Jones to start for the Indianapolis Colts like right now.
I think there's a really good chance that is what happens. But let's remember one thing. Daniel Jones is bad. Like, don't get it twisted. Don't let any, starting quarterback, don't let any narrative in this quarterback battle distract you from the fact that he is bad. So while I'm certainly, and I haven't been for a while, been trying to go out and acquire Richardson via trade right now, I'm a little bit more interested in what happens over these next few weeks in his value. I'm at hold right now, lean sell. The market is probably not going to be where you want to get rid of him for. So I highly doubt you're going to be enticed to sell unless you really think you need to get out from underneath him. It's the quarterback position. It's in Superflex. He still has a relatively insulated value for a little bit. Don't go panic selling because just because Daniel Jones starts the season does not mean that he's going to finish the season as a starter. We know this. He could get hurt. He could get benched. So Anthony Richardson, whether he starts week 1 or not, is going to start games. And whenever he starts, if he puts up a 20-point fantasy week, it's going to be, we're going to bounce right back up. I got to follow my camera in the right direction. So hold, lean, sell if you can actually get somebody who's going to give you market value, which is probably not going to happen.
See, this was the test, because this, I think, in the quote unquote off season, and I know You somewhat challenged that notion, even though it is an off season. It's not an off season, if I understood you correctly. Just because NFL teams have, their off season, but they're still making moves, etc. This is classic because you're absolutely right. And I'm looking at Sleeper NFL tweeted out per Jeremy Fowler that Anthony Richardson fully expects to be ready to go for training camp. So that brief moment of time, it might have already passed. I mean, I don't know what the vibe is out there. I mean, yesterday it felt like this was grim, and today it might be a different story. So it might not even matter anymore. But sometimes you have these brief windows of time where you can go out and acquire Anthony Richardson for dirt cheap, or you can trade away Daniel Jones because somebody thinks in June of all times, 3 months away from the start of the NFL season, that Daniel Jones is going to be the locked-in starter for the Indianapolis Colts. But you're right. We know what Daniel Jones is at this point. He's gotten enough opportunities. He got a damn contract extension with the New York Giants, for crying out loud, like $40 million a year. So we've seen Daniel Jones. We know what he is. We don't necessarily know what Anthony Richardson is, because he's been dealing with injuries. We know that there's a lot of upside there. His accuracy still isn't where it needs to be at the NFL level. I understand that. But if Anthony Richardson hits, and he could hit, he still could hit. Now, he could fall flat on his face too. That's definitely an option. But I think Anthony Richardson, as a result of this news, if there's somebody wanting to get off of him, and I understand this might not be a popular opinion, but I'm telling you right now, I am buying Anthony Richardson. I'm selling Daniel Jones. Like I think that's just what you have to do.
Yeah, I also think that the market price is still a little too high on Richardson for me to be going out and buying. If I can get him for under market value, I'm in 100%. I believe he's QB 22 right now. He might have changed after this whole new cycle has happened, but at QB 22, I don't think I'm going to be actively buying. If I can get a lower offer, then I'm interested. But you're correct in, like, he's the side of the equation that you want to be interested if you're going to be buying anybody, and if you're going to be selling anybody. As of right now, it's going to be Daniel Jones.
So as of right now, according to Dynasty Data Lab, and I have a new obsession with this website, he is a 9th round startup pick, right next to Devontae Adams and Trey Harris.
Too high for me.
Okay, fair enough. I would be buying at that price. I mean, obviously it depends on your team construction too. If you're a rebuild team, I think he's an obvious target. Now, if you're if you're a win now team, I'm probably not moving off of Devontae Adams because I love his situation this year. But you could talk me into, giving up a Tucker Kraft who's ranked 2 spots below him for an Anthony Richardson, who I'm not that big of a fan of, or a Jaden Reed. Like that's about that territory where that he's in. And with those players, I'm definitely, I disagree with you. I'm in at that price. So, but that's just an example, I think, of using the news as it comes out and staying on top of the news, so you can gain an advantage and an upper hand on your league mates. Because sometimes some people panic and they sell people or players way too soon as a result of the news, and you can kind of stoke those fires too. You can send out some feelers for Anthony Richardson to see if the Anthony Richardson manager is willing to move off of them. You can kind of, poke the flames a little bit to see. You don't have to send your best offer, and I wouldn't right away, but that's what I would do throughout the off season. Is when you see these news blurbs pop up and it's a player that you believe in or you feel has some upside, go ahead and, just send a little trade offer out there. That's how I would play it. Anything else to add, Matt Babich, or what's another strategy that you're using in the off season that is going to help your dynasty team come September?
Yeah, I think the earlier you have to do a roster evaluation every year going into the next year, pre-rookie draft. And the earlier you have your roster evaluation, the longer you have to prepare your path forward and start gauging trades, figuring out, what you want your roster to look like when the rookie draft starts, what you want to do during the rookie draft. You can start thinking all this out, and then as news comes in, you can continue to update your process because there's a lot of information to take in, and performing a roster evaluation oftentimes is not very easy. There's a lot of time, more often than not, teams are in the middle of the road, with a stroke of luck and, maybe a couple of big trades in terms of maybe trading away some future capital and selling out for a championship. You could potentially turn into a champion, or you could fumble all that and be one of the worst teams in the league with no future capital. So one of the hardest things to do is when you're in the middle of the road and telling yourself, what should I do? And oftentimes the best thing, believe it or not, is to just be patient and wait it out a little bit, because we learn so much throughout the season, and we're at a time where selling players, if you're trying to sell players off of your roster and rebuild, you're at the worst point in the dynasty cycle to do that. You've missed your window. It was last season when the year is going on. Everyone loves their teams in the offseason is one thing that always rings true. They're staring at that team page every day. They fall in love with the players who have been on their roster for years. And it's going to be hard to move off of a Kyler Murray right now if you're trying to maybe rebuild in a super flex league, because the value's not there. It's all in the rookie picks. So when you got to make your evaluation of your roster, you have to be honest with yourself. That's one of the hardest things to do in Dynasty, and a lesson I've learned the hard way multiple times is having way too much confidence in your build. Taking things from almost like I have to take a pessimistic approach when I take my roster evaluation, because I know I'm going to have an optimistic bias about the roster that I have put together. And this year, I feel like I've done it better than I have in other leagues. And like in the Dynasty Roundtable League, like I'm in a terrible spot. But I know I'm at a bad time to move off of these players. So I have not really much of a choice than to see what I can do during the draft and move some of these players during the season and hope, they don't get injured. So you got to be honest with yourself. You got to perform your roster evaluation, and you got to chart your path forward, because there is an infinite amount of possibilities for you to turn your team into a stronger contender throughout the offseason. And it requires a grind and a lot of time and thought spent into your strategy.
Yeah, that's well said. There's a website called Dynasty Daddy where you can plug in your team to see how their website figures where you're at on a contending basis. It ranks you as a contender, and it ranks the value of your roster too. That's a very helpful tool for me. And I noticed that this year, a lot of my teams are kind of transitioning out of that 2 to 3 year window. I won some championships, but now I've got some aging veterans on some of my teams. So I got to figure out what I want to do. Do I want to, push the chips in one more time and let it roll? Or do I want to start making some moves and hedge my bet a little bit and acquire some of that rookie pick value in exchange for some of those veterans? And, I'm going to have to do exactly what you said. I'm going to have to look at my roster. I'm going to have to see how my roster stacks up against the rest of the league and, be honest with myself and see if I can really compete. And what's probably going to happen is I'm probably gonna give it some time into the season. I'm probably gonna want to see how the first 3, 4, 5 weeks play out. If that team that's right on the edge of maybe making the playoffs and maybe making a run is red hot, then maybe I'll make a move to add to it to see, if I can really make a run at the playoffs. If the opposite happens, then, I might be selling off some pieces maybe a little bit sooner than I thought I would. But obviously, everything is for me is always in play. If I get an offer for a player on my team that is above value what it should be in my opinion, I'm probably going to make that move regardless of team build, because I feel like I can use that value to go get what I need a little bit later on as well. So I'm somebody who's always chasing value, especially now. Like we talked about it in our last episode. What do you do during the dynasty startup? You chase value. Well, that's typically what I do anyway in the off season. So that's a great point to make. Let's talk about how to make trades, okay? Because this is a topic that some people have asked in the YouTube comments, like, how do you make your league, like, how do you get more trades done? And my answer to that question would be, don't be in a rush to just go out and make trades for the sake of making trades. Um, but I would say you need to take your time. You need to assess the market. You need to figure out what you want by doing exactly what Matt said, figuring out what your team needs, and then greasing the wheels of DMing other managers in the league to see where they're at with some of their
Mhm.
players and some of their picks, and being in constant communication. I mean, even if you're putting in a little silly, gif of Aaron Rodgers when he signs with the Steelers of him, I don't know, making his eyebrow, like, raising his eyebrows, or shrugging at a wide receiver or something, just to keep the league active. And if you're in a good league, it's going to be active and there's going to be people making trades. Like I made a
Mhm.
trade today in our rookie league with Cody, because I talked to Cody, not all the time, but on a regular basis. And Cody put his pick on the block, and we were able to make a deal, and I traded up and got Travis Hunter in our rookie draft. And man, that felt so good when that happened. But anyway, another share of Travis Hunter feels so good. But that's, I think, how you do it. I think trades are one of those things that are tricky, but I think at any time, because in the past, I think maybe I made a mistake by saying, "Oh, you making trades for veterans at a certain time is probably not a good idea." And I would say any time's really a good time to make a trade if you're on the better end of getting the value
Yeah,
in exchange. You
100%.
know what I mean? Like, so I think right now is a good time to make a trade. Tomorrow will be a good time to make a trade in Dynasty. And I think just keeping your league engaged, or greasing those wheels and sending those DMs and messages in the league chat is probably the best way to do that. And that constant communication and engagement, not just in trades. I mean, like I think it's just going to be very, very beneficial for you later on. But what are your thoughts about all this as I'm babbling here?
Yeah, so good call out on what I said about trading veterans at this point in the year. I was speaking more on average around, how the typical value perception cycle occurs. But yes, you're correct. I think one thing I'll add in terms of methodology that you left out is the sleeper trade block. If you're on sleeper, is a great way. It's like fishing. You're not gonna
Hmm.
catch something every time, but it's an easy way for everyone in your league to say, "Hey, I am open to listening to offers on these players." And a lot of times, somebody who's interested in those players will reach out and message you and say, "Hey, I'm interested in so and so," and that can spark a conversation. Or if you put people on the trade block, if you have kind of ideal trade partners that you've been looking at, you can message them and say, "Hey, I put so and so on the block a couple of days ago. Not sure if you saw. Like, let me know if you're interested." Um, just little things like that, and dynasty managers, it's about you're building a relationship between another person in your league. And it's when somebody wants a trade, when they're looking for a running back and you're one of the running back heavy teams in the league, they may go to you because you're active. You're always trying to see, where their head's at. If they're trying to make a deal, if not, cool, no biggie. If you come with fair offers that are centered and you can have respectful conversations around it, essentially saying if you're a pleasant person to deal with and you're active, always trying to get something done, people will also seek you out more for trades because they know, like, hey, Seth is active. He's always sending fair trades. He's always down to deal. Like, let's see what he wants. And just being active as in as many ways as you can is going to be the way to do it. And my final thought on trades is, come fair and have a mutual beneficial perspective, because far too often, and we know the people in our leagues, that it doesn't matter what the situation is or how many times it's happened, their deals are purely to pull the rug over on you and get a vastly better deal. And you can never get them to meet in the middle. And that's where,
Yep.
the trade calculators can be helpful in terms of gauging, value. But the people who live by them and try to, I have to win by 300 points. The amount of deals I've gotten done where I, it was even or like I barely lost points, it's comical, because you start talking about, I threw in an extra third in 2027 and I lost the deal by, 40 points. But
Yeah.
if this trade works out for me, I don't care about that third round pick in 2027.
Yeah.
So when you come for that aspect of like, this helps you in this way, this helps me in this way. And, maybe in terms of fantasy points per game totals or lifetime value, whatever these metrics are, you might lose. But if doing that trade is what helped your roster, then you won. The biggest lie in fantasy that people believe is that there is always one trade winner. Sometimes there are two trade winners. Sometimes there are zero trade winners. It's the way it works.
Yeah. Yeah, and it never ceases to amaze me, some of the reactions to trades in leagues. It's just so fascinating to me. I've had it happen multiple times where I've had everybody come into the chat and say, "Oh, you won that trade, you fleeced them, blah blah blah," which, I hate it when people do that, to be honest with you. And then like a year later, it's like, oh man, what Seth's a real idiot for making that move. And that's kind of the how it has to work out. If you're a win now team and I'm not saying you should do this now because this is going to touch on a point I'm about to make here in a minute. And you're willing to trade rookie picks for players, that's probably not going to work out for you in the long run. It probably won't. But guess what? You're trying to win a title. So if you're going out and getting Devontae Adams right now, that's a really good deal for you because Devontae Adams is going to be awesome this year with the Rams. Now, I wouldn't go get him now because this leads into my next point. The one trade I would be extremely leery of making right now is going out and getting some of those older veteran players, because my point would be, what's the rush there? I'm all for making dynasty trades, but I want to be on the other side of that. I want to be acquiring value. I want to be acquiring rookie picks. I want to be kind of shedding the fat off my roster, especially if I'm a rebuilding team. And, I'm probably going to do that anyway, because that's just who I am as a dynasty manager. I'm always going to be seeking out value. And so that would be the one trade I would caution people making right now is don't feel like you need to rush out and like this person in the league that wanted to trade me Daniel Jones. Now his team is stacked and I'm a rebuilding team. So I'm definitely in the market for trading him Daniel Jones, but guess what I want in return? I want rookie picks. And I'm going to try to get as many as I can from him. And there's an offer in my inbox right now that, I'll just throw it out there. It's Jaden Reed and a future third round rookie pick. And if I'm being honest, I think that's a fair deal considering where Dynasty Data Lab has them. But again, Dynasty Data Lab, I don't know what's wrong with my brain. I can't figure out if I want to say data or data. What's right here as I'm looking for Daniel Jones.
Neither and both,
Which, by the way, Daniel Jones is ranked right next to a retired player in Derek Carr in round 17 of a dynasty startup. So I probably should accept this trade. But to be honest with you, I don't love Jaden Reed and, a rookie third round pick. I kind of want to see if I can make him pay a little bit more. So that's probably what I'm going to do, but we'll see. But anyway, that's just one example. Like, why is this guy coming out and acquiring Daniel Jones right now? I don't think it's a smart play. So I should probably take advantage of the value right now. And it's a risk for me to wait, a little bit because I have this offer on the table right now that I probably couldn't have got a week ago. So all of these factors, this is why I love Dynasty, because all of these factors come into play at a moment in time, and you have to make a decision, just like an NFL team would have to make a decision. Like, I remember the Bears, and this is where the Bears were stupid. They had an offer for a 5th round pick for Velus Jones, or maybe it was a 3rd round pick for Velus Jones. I can't remember. It was probably a 5th round pick from some team for Velus Jones, and they didn't do it. And they definitely should have done it, based on, where Velus Jones isn't even on the team now. So all of these decisions that you make lead up to where your team is going to be. And this is why I love Dynasty. So the overall point there is be careful about going out and acquiring veterans. There's really no rush to do that right now, unless they're a part of some bigger deal, that involves younger players and picks, right? If veterans are thrown in there, then so be it. But I would that's where I would caution some people making these trades is don't specifically go out and target Devontae Adams right now, because his value is not going to change that much.
Yeah, very well said.
Is there another strategy, or I know we're kind of jumping around all over the place. We had a show sheet and I just completely nuked it basically right from the start. So that's my bad. But I went with our last point first. I feel like
through the conversation, we've pretty much touched on everything, like kind of going through some of these. A lot of it's about value and being patient and seeking out the right offer, timing the market, which a lot of these points that we're hitting on have touched. We talked about acquiring veterans and, talking to your league mates, establishing relationships, being active and dealing with trades. I think the last thing maybe that we haven't talked about is just developing your tool belt of sources to be sifting throughout the off season. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of accounts that, post videos of, slow-mo short plays saying like, year 2 breakout on the way for this guy. And it's a slow-mo route over the middle in shorts with no defense.
Like, we made fun of the Elijah Moore. I think Tyler Knably came on the show and he was like, look, the Browns put one out for Elijah Moore. And of course, Elijah Moore didn't do anything, but it was of a play where he clearly would have gotten tackled for like a 2-yard gain or something if they wouldn't have been in shorts and a helmet. So that's exactly an example of what you're talking about. And then the Justin Fields one that we talked about on this show, where it's ridiculous. It was like in late May or early June where he's, throwing a pass on air, with no defender. And it's just like, oh, Justin Fields, his footwork has greatly improved and his arm strength has always been there. He's going to dominate.
Yeah, I mean, you got people with like 8,000 followers that are peddling anti-Rishi Rice propaganda in the year 2025.
Yeah,
we need to figure out how to steal good people bad tweets from Memphis, and because every week it seems like I'm like, this person has like 10,000 analysts, and this is one of the dumbest things I've seen this entire offseason. Fantasy football content is truly a weird space, and I say this knowing that I and we as a show are not perfect, but we do come with very pure intentions. We try and fade the noise, and we try not. We don't post anything really for engagement. Like, we don't have much bait. We're here just trying to talk ball and get you better at fantasy football. And there are plenty of people in this space that do that, and I want to be clear on that. And that's where it comes in and just choosing your sources wisely, like pick who you follow, or at least pick who you take seriously when you're scrolling through social media and when you're looking at people's takes, because there's a lot of noise out there and there are a lot of sharp people. So make sure you're being drawn towards the sharp crowd and not the clickbait engagement crowd.
Yes. Yes. And the funny thing is, and just to touch on this real briefly, and then we'll wrap up here. It's funny because sometimes I get accused of this, Matt. I get accused of, oh, this title or thumbnail is, it's clickbaity. And it's like, well, and my literal response is, well, I do want people to watch the video.
We do want you to click on
We
it.
do,
Believe it or not.
I mean, I'm not going to make a beige tan with Times New Roman or Arial font like that says fantasy football content here. There is an aspect of that to it, but the best content, in my opinion, and Lord knows I've done this for 4 or 5 years now, so there are people who are way better at it than me, obviously. But I think the best content is, you have an engaging title, an engaging thumbnail that reflects what the episode is actually about. And the people in that episode give you helpful advice that, is unique to them, meaning that they deliver it with, their personality and they genuinely believe what they're telling you. And some of that advice gets recycled and reused, and it's similar to what other people are saying. And when that happens, when you get a bunch of different fantasy football analysts that are saying, the same thing and that you respect, you apply it to your own process and you move forward is what I do. And Lord knows, we are still in the process of perfecting this thing called fantasy football, but the process, and that's part of it, the process is never over of getting better and better and better, because no matter how good you are, you're gonna miss on some rookies, you're gonna make a dumb trade, you're gonna fuck up, and it's fine as long as you're making more good moves than bad moves. And at the end of the day, if you do that, and exactly what Matt's saying, if you trust us, you watch us, you follow us, if you follow Fantasy Pros or Player Profile or whoever it is, it's good kind of to have multiple sources that you trust, because, for example, Derek Brown is somebody who I think is extremely good at what he does. I work with him at Fantasy Pros. There are fewer people, there aren't too many people I would put above Derek Brown, but I completely disagree with his Rashee Rice take, because his take is Xavier Worthy is going to take the Rashee Rice role, and that makes no sense to me based on the research that we've done on Rashee Rice. So we're pro Rashee Rice. He's not, obviously. That's fine. We can disagree on that. And because we're way ahead of consensus on Rashee Rice, and I get it. There are injury concerns and the legal case is still pending. So obviously a lot of that is still up in the air. It's a calculated risk, but we've explained the take. We've backed it up with evidence, and it's fine. Like that, we're going to see who's right and who's wrong. Right. And that's fantasy football, man. And that's what I love about it, is we can talk about this stuff and we're good and we're fine. So I've talked a lot just now. So maybe Matt Babbage can wrap up the episode in a coherent way. Any final thoughts before we kind of end this thing? Because I think we've covered it.
You said something that I'll make this my final thought about. You said, if as long as you're making more good moves than bad moves, and if people are watching playing Dynasty football, I'm sure they probably placed a bet at some point in their life or have thought about it. And as a gambler, if given you're playing odds that are close to even, generally if you're hitting 56% of your bets or something like that, a rough figure.
I think it's might be 53 or 54% even. Like it might even be a little bit less than that.
Right. So a little bit over 50%, if we generalize it, of your bets, you're profitable. And that's a similar thought process that you can apply to Dynasty. Like, I don't have to be perfect, but if my process is sound and the archetypes of players typically ones with a lot of upside that I'm going after. If I can get 1 out of every 2 to hit, or a little more than 1 out of every 2 to hit, you're going to be a successful dynasty manager, especially if you're, applying these strategies correctly and being honest with your team and doing all these things that we talked about. So it's not about being perfect. It's about being a little bit better than average.
Yeah. And if we all felt the same about all the players, no trades would get done. None. So there you go. So obviously, we have to be different in order for these trades to get, like, we have to have differences of opinion at some level. So anyway, I know these days it's a little bit hard to have that. Not in this community though. All the YouTube comments, for the 99.9% of them are fantastic, and you should definitely comment with your strategies in the off season. How do you get more trades done? What do you do in your league to make it a more engaging, fun environment for everybody? Let us know who you're trading for, who you're trading away. We want to hear all of that. I get back to the comments. Click like, subscribe to the channel. We are getting a lot of new subscribers, so thank you if you've already done that. Matt Babich, tell the people where they can find you on the socials.
You can find me on Twitter at Babich_Matt10, and you can follow the show on Twitter as well at FF Dynasty Table. Yes, I said Twitter. I will always say Twitter.
Yeah, it's Twitter. You can follow me at Seth_DIEWOLD, just as it is on the screen if you're watching the YouTube channel. And if you are watching the YouTube channel, we also have a podcast, so you can listen on the go. Go download that. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts. And until next time, nobody cares about Aaron Rodgers. Have a great morning, afternoon, night, whatever part of your day that you are in, make it a great one, and we will see you later. Bye-bye, everybody.